Hi, my name is Etisha Wilbon. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and the clinical vice president with mental health systems over the Fresno region. So I think that we start by normalizing, this first step to normalizing mental wellness in the Black community has to start with our own personal self-awareness and acknowledging and moving past some of those stigmas that have essentially been taught to us through, like, whether it's generational or intergenerational trauma, things along those lines. We have to first identify them and have that self-awareness to be able to say, okay, this is something that I am experiencing. These are things that I am having a hard time with, are my barriers. But we have to also stop minimizing how we feel. So a lot of us have the ability to say, okay, well, like, I'm having a rough time, or, these financial issues that I'm experiencing is causing anxiety with me, it's causing depression with me, and move past but I'm going to get through it, or, I'm a stronger person, which, while it is a great motivating phrase for a lot of us, can definitely be something that can have a negative connotation to it, meaning that if you are struggling with it and it takes longer than what you have identified and deemed appropriate to get past, that you are then, quote, a weak person. And so we want to kind of, one, steer clear of some of that terminology, but also become aware of how we're feeling, how we're experiencing it, and accepting it. I think giving grace is our first step to normalizing it. We penalize ourselves a lot for having barriers in comparison to what, like, our mother dealt with, or our grandparents, and what they've dealt with going as far back as, like, slavery, and how they surpassed and they persevered through that, kind of getting to a place where we're able to say, okay, my experiences are unique to me and they're not going to be the same, and how I address them is going to be different, and they're not going to be the same as how someone else will. But also, once we can have that self-awareness, prioritizing it, making sure that we're putting ourselves first. And I don't mean it in the sense of, like, moving away from a collectivistic environment where, we're all about the family, to individualistic, but allowing yourself to be selfish. I think selfishness has such a negative connotation attached to it, where we go, if I'm being selfish, then that means I'm not caring about others. And it has all this negative attached to it. But the reality of the situation is sometimes we have to be selfish. Sometimes we have to think solely about ourselves and say, saying yes to this means saying no to taking care of myself, and not allowing yourself to sacrifice in such a way. So it's a very multifaceted and multi-pronged way of addressing mental wellness in the Black community. Is we have to acknowledge it within ourselves, and acknowledge and give ourselves grace with the way that we're addressing it, and acknowledge the uniqueness of it, but also taking the second step of making sure that we step outside of those terms, like it's selfish, or, I have to take care of this to take care of everyone else. Sometimes you have to take care of yourself, because you can't pour from an empty cup. And I don't think that is centralized specifically to the Black community, but I think it's really big in the Black community, because mental health and mental wellness isn't something that we kind of gravitate towards naturally. We gravitate towards spirituality and other different, whether it is healthy or unhealthy coping skills. We gravitate in that direction to find our wellness, but gravitating towards mental health is very foreign. And thinking about selfishness in terms of mental health and mental wellness is also foreign. So making sure that we're acknowledging and stepping outside of that box that has been created for us through our intergenerational trauma, through transgenerational trauma, whatever the case may be, we want to make sure we're still taking care of it and acknowledging things at face value for what they are. So I actually promote mental health and mental wellness in multiple areas of my life. So, like, even in my personal life, I like to make sure that I'm taking care of myself. I think it's really hard to, especially if we think about ourselves as we move up through different systems as, like, managers and vice presidents or program directors, it's really easy to tell people, like, you should take care of yourself. it's easier said than done. So I try to make sure that I'm having my own self-awareness and my own social awareness of like how the people around me are also taking care of ourselves. So I, one, have to like walk the walk that I'm talking at the same time. So if I say, hey, you need to take care of yourself, if I'm not feeling good, that's the time that like, it's not the moment for me to go to work because there's all these things that have to get done. And, I just have to push, push, push. Those are the hard moments where I have to go, I know it's gonna suck and I might have all of these adverse emotions about it later, but I have to take care of myself. How am I gonna do an adequate job? How am I gonna set an example for the people that are under me or for my peers if I'm not taking care of myself the way that I need to? But also making sure that I am doing things that bring me joy. So things that kind of gives me a sense of happiness. I don't want to get stuck in the humdrum of just like work, home, sleep, things along those lines. But also in like, I feel like for my family, I'm setting an example because we weren't taught to take care of ourselves. We were taught to kind of, always get it done, always be the strong one, always do all of these negative things that can be a hindrance to our mental health. And so I personally try to make sure that I'm talking about it. And I'm saying like to my family members, hey, like if you're not feeling good today, the building won't burn. And if it does burn, that's a bigger issue that you guys have to look at later. But you have to take care of yourself because at some point you have to make yourself priority, especially when we're in this helping field. But more so when it comes to like employees that are beneath me and like in my different areas of expertise is I constantly am talking about it. I am constantly having the discussion of like burnout and how are you taking care of yourself? When's the last time you had a vacation? What did you do on your vacation? Was it a vacation where you thought about work the entire time because you had all these other projects? Because technically that's not a vacation. You're still in work mode. Like, how are you like making yourself whole? We, especially like for some of the other CBOs, like we work with difficult populations and we have individuals that are high risk. And a lot of things that come with high risk is we have some high risk scenarios. So it's like making sure that we're debriefing with staff members and what do we need to do if the situation was unsafe? What do we need to do to make you feel safe in this environment again? And how are you taking care of yourself? What did you do today? Not eating lunch at your computer, like actually eating your lunch and having a lunch and trying to steer clear of the working lunch, especially in the pandemic where we are the essential workers and we're working under all of these different pressures. I'm constantly focusing on that. And as a VP, I'm having those conversations with my program managers to have the conversation with their direct line staff of, when have you noticed there's a staff that hasn't taken a vacation? Have a discussion about a vacation. I encourage people that when you come back from a vacation, schedule another vacation so you have something to look forward to, and making sure we're having these discussions surrounding wellness because it's really easy to get stuck in the chaotic day-to-day or, everything that's happening and forget to actually take care of ourselves. While taking care of yourself can be seen as the easiest thing, it is also the most difficult thing because it's about finding time and how do you feel and getting out of that mode. I'm constantly promoting it through what I do on my day-to-day basis and taking care of myself. So if I'm under the weather, I'm not going to come in sick and I'm not going to encourage others to do the same because I want them to be at their best when they're here, because that also is a trickle-down effect to the consumers that we support. If we're going to tell them to take care of themselves, how do we demonstrate that if we're coming in while we're under the weather? Because we want to give them these healthy coping skills and these healthy environments and abilities. But if we are not, walking the walk, that what we're saying, it means absolutely nothing and it's hypocritical. So we want to make sure we're demonstrating what we're saying to our staff, to the individuals that we serve as well. So I actually got into this field primarily because of my family. So my family doesn't really acknowledge mental health, or we've gotten much better. If we're talking about my immediate family, it's gotten a lot better at acknowledging our mental health and the impact that it has on us. But I actually have cousins who were my mom brought in and had guardianship of, and a lot of it was the barriers that they experienced with the terms of why my mom ended up getting their guardianship of them and taking them into her custody and things along those lines, and seeing a lot of like the difficulties that they had and a lot of the emotional things that they kind of encountered and were trying to look past, as well as seeing the response and just kind of noticing the way that my family responded to things like this. A perfect example is I have an older cousin who has schizophrenia, and just noticing some of the stigmatizing statements and the way that people reacted and the way that their interactions with this individual was, did it ring true to unconditional positive regard, and always felt uncomfortable for me. And so as I got older, I'm a very inquisitive person. So it was about like digging deeper and looking more into it and finding these themes and these patterns of like, here are the people in my family that are struggling. And also here's how my family is reacting to it. And why aren't we seeking out help? Like, we are looking at all of these things, and in any other scenario, we go, here's a problem, let's seek out solutions. But when it came to mental health, it was like, here's a problem, let's bury it, let's hide it, let's pretend like it doesn't exist. Let's use these unhealthy coping skills, or let's use these minimizing statements. And as I got older, they got more uncomfortable. And I took a class, it wasn't actually a psychology class. It was actually taking a counseling class on a whim. It was a suggestion of one of my professors when I was an undergrad. And I was like, okay, cool. And I absolutely fell in love with it. And it was exactly what I was looking for. I'd spent most of my undergrad looking for something to answer these questions and understand. And so I was like, psychology's it. Understanding the brain, being in a lab in a white coat's gonna help me understand why my family does all of these things. And taking that class was like, oh, psychology was the right direction, but it didn't answer the questions I needed. And it wasn't until I took that class that it was kind of like my own aha moment of saying, all right, so I can't go back and fix what happened in the way that my family responded, but I can educate. And before I can educate, I must learn this new information and figure out, how do we change it? So I'm constantly having those conversations, but I do this because if I don't have the conversation, or if people like me don't have the conversation with people that look like me in the Black community, then who will? Because no one ever had the conversation with me. I didn't know. I feel like I stumbled onto this. And if it wasn't for that stumbling, I wouldn't be in this area. And I'm very grateful for it, but now I have to continue to share. So it's like paying it forward. I have to keep sharing the information, because I imagine there are other people who are having the same confusion, who are having the same concerns, that just want to understand as well. So I'm actually really, really big on family, and really, really close to my siblings and my nieces and nephews. So a lot of my like mental wellness activities involve my family. I do have some things that are solely to myself, just because I think everyone should have a mental wellness activity that's pretty solitary. I am such a big reader. I love reading. So I kind of make my own reading goals throughout the year. So this year I said I'd read at least 40 books. Will I read the 40 books? I don't know. But the goal of like creating that is to at least make an attempt to get to it. So I just finished my first book, although it took me a lot longer than historically it has. It's something I enjoyed doing when I was much younger and lost track of. And so part of like my reassessment of the year was, okay, what have I lost track of that I really enjoyed that I want to get back into? And reading was one of them. Like, I read a bunch of like professional, career, educational books, but I have steered clear of reading for fun. And so that's something that I wanted to kind of move myself back into is like, I have Audible. It's great to listen to books, but I actually like the action of reading the book. And so that's something that I do for it. Or spend time with my nieces and nephews, whether it's watching like Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, which seems absolutely minimal, but to a 2-year-old, when it's time to do the hot dog dance, it is the most like enjoyable thing for me because I enjoy being silly, and it kind of fills me up to kind of dance around and joke with my 2-year-old nephew, or play dolls with an 11-year-old, things along those lines, having movie nights, going shopping with my mom, things along those lines, because family is a really big value for me and it does bring me joy. Doing things with them is a key part of my mental wellness, but also I like my solitary time. So that's like doing puzzles, painting, reading a book. And I make a goal to focus on those things in the time that I have, because I want to make the best of my day. Even if it's something as simple as, well, I am not a morning person. I'll get up at 5 to go to the gym. Yes, I'll do it begrudgingly, but I'm still getting up and I always feel really good once I'm done with it. So it's just essentially making sure that I'm doing things that are going to bring me joy, and I look back on them with excitement and they provide those fond memories for me. And that's what is really important. And those are my favorite activities to really engage in.